Chapter 4. Togo to the rescue! A cool surprise? Nancy questioned. Is it in connection with the mystery? Bess, George, and Hannah Gruen nodded affirmatively. George said, "We found another word in the border of the rug." Nancy smiled. "Don't make me guess what it is. Tell me quick." "It's in English," Bess spoke up. "The word is carry. See, here it is." Ned repeated the whole message so far. "Carson, find mannequin. I love her. Carry." Hannah, Ned, and the girls looked at one another, puzzled. What was Mr. Drew supposed to carry, and where? No one had a ready answer, and Bess and George expressed regret at never having seen the mannequin in the window of Tahmasp's rug shop. Bess glanced at her wristwatch. "I really must go home," she said. "Nancy, if you learn what the rest of the sentence is, let me know." George said she must run along too, but Nancy and Ned continued to study the rug. Nancy, recalling that Hannah had a sore finger, decided she should help with the preparations for dinner. She excused herself to go to the kitchen. Half an hour later, Mr. Drew came in, and soon afterward dinner was served. Conversation turned to the discovery of the word carry, but like the others, the lawyer had no idea what the rest of the sentence was. "It's interesting that Farouk used both French and English in his message," he remarked. "You may find words in other languages, even Greek or Turkish." Ned laughed. "I'd be sure to miss them. To me, the characters look like part of a design rather than a word. I hope Farouk didn't use any Greek or Turkish letters of the alphabet. We'd never recognize them." Directly after dinner, Ned said he would have to leave. "I'll be in touch," he told Nancy, "and wish me luck selling a big fat insurance policy to my client." "I sure do," Nancy said. Nancy sat down in the living room to read the volume on Turkey, which she had bought at the River bookshop. She became engrossed in the descriptions of various interesting places. The Topkapi Palace, she read, had been the home of several generations of sultans, but was now a museum. On exhibit in one of the palace's many buildings were the extravagantly ornamented garments, headpieces, and various objects that had belonged to the sultans and their families. "Oh my goodness," Nancy said to herself, as she read that the palace had 320 rooms, and that 3,000 people had once lived under its roof. Many of these, of course, were servants. "Kemal Ataturk changed all this and made Turkey a republic," Nancy read. "He is considered the George Washington of present-day Turkey." The book contained many color photographs. One showed a service of gold coffee cups, each one inlaid with 240 diamonds. There was an ebony bench inlaid with ivory. A huge turquoise had been embedded in the center. "How exquisite," Nancy said to herself as she gazed upon a cradle of gold inlaid with jewels. She laughed softly. I wonder if the baby in it slept any better than those in plain old wooden cradles. She put down the book and stared into space, visualizing life at the Topkapi Palace long ago. Laughter, music, dancing girls in costume, the magnificently attired sultans. Nancy suddenly sat up straight and came back to reality. She was reminded of the mannequin who might have looked like one of the sultan's wives. I haven't tried to track her down in the River Heights shops that sell women's dresses, Nancy thought, and I haven't checked the museum. The grandfather clock in the hall was just chiming 8. The stores in the museum will be open until 9, Nancy told herself, getting up. She hurried to the hall and consulted the classified telephone directory. One after another, she called each department store and dress shop in town. None of them had purchased a mannequin from the rug dealer. Nancy sighed and called the museum. An assistant to the curator answered. "By any chance," Nancy asked, "do you have a mannequin that came from Farouk Tahmasp's rug shop a couple of years ago?" "We have one, but I don't know where she came from," the man replied. "She's a Turkish lady wearing a white veil." Nancy's spirit soared. Had she found Farouk's mannequin? I'll be right down to see it, she told him. Nancy quickly explained to her father and Hannah where she was going and rushed outside to get her car. "Hold on," her father called. "I'm coming along." It was already 8:30, so Nancy drove at the speed limit. She parked quickly, and the Drews rushed into the museum. "Where's the Turkish mannequin, please?" Nancy asked the guard in the entrance hall. "Downstairs." Nancy and her father ran down the steps. Ahead of them was an exhibit of figures in costume from many countries of the world. They hunted for the Turkish figure and finally found her on the far side of the room. Her outfit was different from the one Nancy recalled in Farouk's window. Could she be the mannequin they sought? The custodian of the exhibit had followed the Drews. In a rather tired voice, he said, "It's nearly 9 o'clock, folks. That's closing time." "I know," said Nancy. "Tell me, where did the museum get this mannequin?" "Some wealthy woman gave it to us." "When was that?" "Oh, about 5 years ago, maybe longer." The Drews looked at each other in disappointment. At last the lawyer said, "My daughter and I are looking for a certain Turkish mannequin. This isn't the right one." Nancy and her father said goodnight to the custodian and went up the stairs. Neither spoke until they were in the car. Then Mr. Drew patted his daughter's shoulder. "It was a good try, Nancy. Better luck next time." Mrs. Gruen was sorry to learn of their dashed hopes. "Something good is bound to pop up," she prophesied. Nancy nodded and went back to the big upholstered wing chair in the living room to continue reading the book on Turkey. Togo snuggled beside her. First Mr. Drew, then Hannah stopped to say goodnight to her, suggesting that she not stay up too late. The young detective smiled. "One more hour," she said. "This book is absolutely fascinating," Nancy sighed. "It certainly makes me want to visit Turkey." "I was there once at the time of Ramadan," her father said. "That is the most holy month of the year for the Muslims. During that period, they eat nothing each day between dawn and sunset. At the end of the month, the young people follow a very lovely custom. It is called the sugar holiday. They buy bonbons and give them to the old people." Hannah had picked up the prayer rug from the floor and draped it carefully over a chair in the hall. Nearly an hour went by when Nancy thought she heard someone fumbling at the kitchen door. Apparently it did not bother Togo because he neither barked nor got up. But when Nancy rose and walked toward the kitchen, Togo followed her. She went through the darkened room and peered outside. There was no one around. "Perhaps I'd better turn on the porch light," she thought, and flicked the switch. The outside lamp illuminated the entire Drew yard. No one was in sight. "I must have heard a prowling animal," Nancy thought. She turned off the light and went back to the living room. She became interested in reading that the name of the Muslim sacred scripture is the Quran. Today's students are finding it extremely difficult to read the book because it is not printed in the Latinized alphabet being used in the schools. The author went on to say that a translation was in progress. Parents are glad it is being done because they are proud to have their children not only read but memorize the Quran from cover to cover. Nancy was about to put the book down when she idly turned to a section of color photographs showing robes and uniforms of olden times when sultans and their assistants lived so lavishly. "Imagine," she thought, "this uniform has 206 diamonds sewed into it." Nancy finished looking at the fabulous costumes, then turned off the light and sat thinking about the mystery. Presently she was startled again by a sound from the rear of the house. Was someone tiptoeing on the first floor? She did not move, and Togo did not wake up. A few seconds later, the young detective became aware of the shadow of a man moving forward from the rear of the hall. She stood up without making a sound. The intruder sneaked toward the front door, his back to her. He grabbed the Turkish prayer rug from the chair in one hand. With his other, he turned the front doorknob. "Stop!" Nancy cried out, leaping across the living room floor to the hall. The thief turned, startled. Nancy reached for the rug and was able to grab one end of it with both hands. The man gave it a yank, but she would not let go. "Don't you dare take this!" she shouted at him and called loudly, "Dad! Dad!" By this time, the man had the front door partly open. Nancy began to feel she was waging a losing battle until Togo joined her. Seeing the tug of war, the terrier growled. Then he leaped up and grabbed the man's shirt cuff. End of chapter 4.